Welcome to another lesson about the IELTS Listening Section, and today's lesson is about how to do note completion questions. So let's get started right away and dig into how to handle these types of questions. When it comes to note completion questions, basically what you're doing is filling in the blanks with the words that you hear in the recording. So my first tip for note completion is just to be aware that you have to spell these words correctly. You'll hear an exact word in the recording, and then you'll fill in the blank, and it has to be spelled correctly. So my first tip is this: when it comes to writing in the words, it may be that you're not completely sure how to spell the word when it comes to writing it in. So what I would encourage you to do is to write the word in any way that you can, even if you think it might be spelt incorrectly, because just a reminder that at the end of the listening section, after 30 minutes, that you have an additional 10 minutes, which is not a part of the exam, but an additional 10 minutes to transfer your answers from your notebook to your answer sheet. And if you haven't spelt a word correctly, this is where you can check your spelling. And maybe by the time you get to the end where you're transferring your answers, you will remember how to spell it. But as you're listening to the recording, don't let being unsure of the spelling stop you from writing in the word, because at least when you go to transfer the answers, you will have the word there, and then you can check your spelling. So that's just a tip overall for this type of question. But let's get started on the strategy for handling note completion questions. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to listen carefully and read the instructions, and then mark the instructions so you're very clear on exactly what you're allowed to do when it comes to writing in the words. So in this case, it clearly says no more than 3 words and or a number. So this could be 2 words and a number, 1 word and 2 numbers, or 3 words and a number or less, as long as you have no more than 3 words. And be sure to underline it to make sure that you won't be second guessing yourself and have to go back and check the instructions as you're writing in the words and completing the questions. So once you've read the instructions carefully, you've underlined them, you're well aware of the task that you have to achieve, then you go on to looking at the questions. You're given time to look at the questions, so only look at the questions that they've asked you to look at and prepare to take that time to answer the questions. The first thing you'll always want to do is underline the title, and this gives you a little more idea of knowing for sure what the context of the recording is that you're listening to. That's the other reason for listening carefully to the instructions. That's where you always receive the context or the situation that the recording is taking place in. So always make sure that as you listen carefully and as you underline the title and look at the questions, that you're well aware of the context of the recording. And this will go a long way to helping you improve your listening as you're completing the questions. The next step is to be able to predict what you're going to be listening for. And there's 2 ways to do this. One is to mark keywords, and you can find instructions for keywords in other lessons about different types of listening questions. But another way to predict is to make little notes beside the blanks so that you know the type of word that you're listening for. And in this case, there are not a lot of keywords to underline. So this is where note completion, putting these little notes will help you to fill in the blanks. So for example, for number 11, it says well known for something. Well, this could really be anything. So there's not really a note that you can put beside there that will be very helpful, but you know that you will be listening to for something to go in there. And just a reminder that in these types of questions, all the questions will come in order as you're listening. And then you have some another section that the complex consists of, and these are different rooms or facilities within the context. So for number 12, you know that you have to add one and write it in. So just make a little note that you're listening for a room or a facility, and you will hear the rooms that are mentioned that are already there for you. So just follow along. And when you've heard about the public library and then the restaurants, you know that the next thing you're going to hear is the room or facility that you have to fill in. Then you have some historical background, and it's very important to be aware of these dates. You have 1940 and then 1960s. And then you see that the center was, and then you have question 13. And you know that this is going to be a verb, and it's going to be in the past tense. So just write that little note beside there. Your clue that it's in past tense is the word was. You know that this is past tense. So you're going to be putting something in there. You have a verb in the past tense, and you know that this, the word that you put in there is going to have to suit the past tense tone for that question. And then you have another date. And one little clue is you have 1940 and then 1960. The recording is probably going to be consistent, so you know you're going to be listening for a year. And so just put the date. You could also put year if you think it's going to be a year. But one other clue that it's going to be a year is that preposition of time. And it's a preposition of time, and it's the word in. So whenever you see the word in, you know when it comes to prepositions of time, and this is a little grammar tip, if it's a preposition of time and it's the word in, you know it's either going to be a month or a year. And because we have the clues of other years being mentioned, most likely it's going to be a year. And then you'll see the word managed by, and in this case, you know, it's probably going to be a business or an organization. It could possibly be a person, but most likely it's a business or organization. So just write that little note there so that you can remind yourself of what you're listening for when you come to this part of the recording. And then in the final question, you know that you're listening for a number, the number of days per year. So by writing these little notes, you can predict and have a good idea of exactly what you're listening for before the recording starts, and you're well prepared to listen as effectively as possible. And then the next step is just to be aware of possible synonyms and paraphrasing. I've just underlined some possibilities. There's a good chance that you will not hear the phrase opened to public in the recording. It will be a paraphrase or a synonym of open to public. It might say the grand opening or started or began. These are all possible synonyms for opened in public or managed by. It could also be run by or administered by. So just be aware of synonyms that could possibly come up. Days per year, it might be days each year. So just be aware that there are different ways of saying things, and you'll want to be attentive to these as you're listening to the recording. The next thing I want to mention, and it's true of most questions in the listening section, and this is just to be aware of the kinds of distractions that you might hear in the recording. And this is where they might say something, but then change it. So they'll say the center has always been famous for its theatrical productions. But, so now they're changing the question, the answer that you're listening for, but in recent years that has become better known for operatic performances. So they'll try to distract you with the idea of theatrical productions when the real thing that it's famous for is operatic performances. So always be patient as you're listening. But again, once you hear the correct answer, write it down immediately. Don't hesitate. So be patient and wait for the correct answer. And then when you do hear the correct answer, write it down without delay and move on to the next question. And again, in the second example, in the original design of the building, there was a sculpture hall next to the art galleries. However, so now they're going to tell you something has changed. And so this is really where you'll find the answer that you're listening for. And then sometimes a distraction can be in the way that they correct a mistake. So they'll actually say a mistake in the recording and then correct it. And you're listening for the correct answer. So don't be distracted by the mistake. The first visitors were welcomed in July 1983. No, sorry. No, sorry, I made a mistake. That's when the center was completed. It wasn't open until September of that year. So that's your actual opening date, September of 1983. So just be aware of distractions, the importance of being patient and waiting for the answer that you need, but also don't hesitate. As soon as you hear the answer that you're listening for, make sure you write it and immediately, and don't hesitate, and move on to the next one. The key to success in any listening type of question is to always be moving forward. So if you're not sure of a question or you miss a question, don't panic. The idea is to get as many correct as possible. You get 1 point for each correct answer, and you don't lose any points for incorrect answers. So keep moving forward. If you miss a question, don't panic. Just make sure that you don't focus on it so much that you miss the next one, and then the mistakes pile up. So keep moving forward, and this is the key to success in the listening section. And then once you're aware of all these things and you've read the instructions, you've predicted the answers that you're going to hear, you're ready to start answering. And if you'd like to try this set of questions, you can find a link for the recording in the notes for this lesson, as well as a transcript, and you'll find the answers there too. So all the best as you continue to prepare, and good luck in the listening section.